In 1990, LL Cool J dropped this bomb. Mama said, knock you out. And one of the lines from that, don't call it a comeback. What do you think we're going to do today?
We're talking comebacks.
Comebacks.
But we're not going to call it a comeback.
Comebacks for bands can be a myriad of things.
Yeah.
And we're going to cover all the bases today.
Yeah, there are interesting details for certain albums, for certain bands, lineup changes, record label switches, members dying. I mean, there's no limit to the things that can cause a band to kind of fall out of favor and then try to rise from the ashes.
And it can be even, a band just is not producing the material they once produced. And all of a sudden, bam, they release something amazing.
And, I was thinking about this since we talked about the theme. There aren't a lot of these anymore. These things happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe 2000s. But as we've talked before, bands don't have that 2-3 album safety net anymore. Most of these comebacks are classic bands that have had, an established career for years. And unless bands, when they release their first album now, unless they take off, there's not an option for a comeback.
Yeah, and doing research with this, metal bands, there have been a lot of comebacks. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that genre has so many comebacks, but like some of these bands are like the cat with 9 lives.
Yeah,
Iron Maiden,
Judas Priest,
both of them, and heck, you can even throw Black Sabbath in there.
Yeah, well, that's a shifting of personnel in the band.
Yeah,
and usually that is the big shift is the front man.
Yeah,
and all 3 of those bands did that, and only one had success doing that. And the other 2 have the original singer back. So we'll talk about that too.
We've got a bunch of stuff to unravel here, and it'll be a fun show. So strap in. If you have a seatbelt, strap in, because we don't want you rattling off.
Where's my seatbelt?
Jay's looking for his seatbelt.
What's your first band that you want to start with?
Well, to keep you happy, we're going to start with the alphabet.
We're going to start with the A band, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh,
how about
that ticks a box for me.
Yeah.
Let me take the Vinyl Ventures record down.
Aerosmith, Permanent Vacation.
Oh yeah. This is one, as soon as we talked about comebacks, this is one that immediately came to mind.
Yeah, they were newly sober. Mm-hmm. The band was back together. This was not the first album the band all came back together.
Right.
But it was a regenesis.
Yeah.
It was like the phoenix rising from the ashes.
Yeah, and that's very good. I was 13 when this came out, and it was huge. These guys, not a hair band, they're a classic rock band from the early 70s who, rose to the peak and then fell to the depths.
Yeah,
and the timing of this, it just put them right in with those 80s metal bands. But they were the kings of radio and MTV after this record came out.
Oh yeah, it came out at precisely the right time. Videos were still popular.
Yeah,
and really, video in general all over television was driving music up a lot.
I know it did for me. It kind of showcased music of bands and artists that, it was kind of a precursor to YouTube, if you think about it.
Yeah, it really was.
Because it kind of gave you a little peek into what you might get from buying a whole record. Radio would play the hits, but then video just added that extra level of, familiarity.
Yeah,
to it.
absolutely.
And this album, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember all the hits. You have
Dude Looks Like a Lady is probably the number one.
That's the first single
Ragdoll.
from it, Ragdoll, and then Angel.
Yeah.
All three of those were enormous hits for this band. And it's a great record. Two of those songs I can do without ever hearing again. But, because they got played so much. And, me as a 13-year-old, I wasn't like that intimately familiar with Aerosmith until this. I mean, this is really the record that introduced me and my generation to them, to be able to go back and learn about their history. But I have a retort to this record, because this is a very special record. There are two other records that really had to do with this comeback.
Yes.
And the first was Aerosmith's intended comeback record, Done with Mirrors, which was released in 1985. Now, Joe Perry and Brad Whitford had left the band, so they had two replacement guitarists for two albums. And this is the record that the record company put together to kind of re-energize Aerosmith, and it didn't. It fell flat. Interesting thing is, one of the great songs on this is Let the Music Do the Talking, which was actually from Joe Perry's first Joe Perry Project record. So they re-recorded it. That's, very interesting. But that's number 3.
It's number 3. It's gone.
The real record that I say re-energized Aerosmith was Run DMC's Raising Hell. And it's their re-recording of Walk This Way that not only gave Aerosmith new life, but it was really the first rap rock combo that became a pop sensation.
Yeah, and when did this come out?
86.
86. So it was 1 year before
Permanent Vacation.
Permanent Vacation.
Year after Done with Mirrors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think that these two bands and genres are forever kind of entangled because of these 3 records.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
And it's a cool story.
Yeah.
And then Aerosmith went on to, I think, 3 platinum albums in a row. You had Permanent Vacation, you had Pump, you had Get a Grip.
Oh yeah. It put them back in the public eye that they've never really gone out of.
No, I mean,
the music's not what it used to be, but
these guys are in their, early to mid 70s.
Yeah.
They're doing their farewell, their peace out tour right now. I think it's a lot to ask of a band to go from, local rockers in Boston to national and international stardom, to fall out of favor, and then to have the resurgence in the 80s.
Yeah.
And then, rock music and that type of music in general has kind of been minimalized and marginalized since the mid 2000s, really.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. I think it's a lot to ask of a band to, do that many times, because it happening once is enough of a miracle.
Yeah.
So that's a great call, man. That's a good one to start with.
I love the tie-in, though.
Yeah. It's
That's
a good one to
perfect.
start with. Yeah. So that's a 3B, as I like to call it. Green Day, American Idiot. I know that I already talked about this in Essentials 9 or 10. This, believe it or not, was a comeback record for Green Day. It's their 7th record, but it's the one that came out after Warning. And I've talked about Warning recently in my impromptu record review, if you'd like to go to that. This album kind of brought them back into favor after Insomniac, Nimrod, Warning. I mean, we remember Green Day for Dookie.
Yeah,
and
that's
the
one
huge hits that they had. This is the one that brought them back, and man, did it bring them back. It was released in 2004 by Reprise Records, produced by Rob Cavallo. It's a fun listen. It's like that punk band grows up, and gets political and I mean, I remember the first time I heard this music, I'm like, man, Billy Joe Armstrong's after Warning is kind of giving me a Beatles and Brian Wilson feeling.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it may just be 3 chords, but there's something about the way this guy puts music together that's fantastic. It's a great listen. I mean, if you don't want to listen to it as a concept album,
Yeah.
you can just listen to it as, well, these aren't all as short a songs as Green Day is known for, but
Right.
it's a great listen. I love it. I mean, what a bold idea. You do an album like Warning that kind of pulls them even further away from their fan base, even though I think it's a masterpiece. And then, hey, let's do a double concept record as a comeback.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like 2112 with Rush. I mean,
Yeah, it really is.
it's like, let's just throw all of the cards down and take that gamble. It's really cool. It's a great album. I love the cover. I love that I can read the spine of it.
Ooh, yeah.
That really does something for me too. Green Day is another of those bands. Like when Dookie exploded, I was not really even interested. And then a couple records later, when Warning came out, yeah, I was right there. So
Yeah, in doing research, this album pops up on every single list
of comeback records.
of comeback records.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has it on the list.
And isn't it crazy that it's like almost 20 years old?
It doesn't seem that long ago, does it?
No.
Time flies.
Time flies when you're spending money on records. What's your next one?
I'm going to throw the Behemoth up there.
Okay. Oh, do you need help? Can I spot you?
Yeah, it's not going to...
I'll hold it.
Yeah.
It'll hold it.
Oh,
Famous last words.
there we go. Led Zeppelin Celebration Day.
Yes.
This is a different kind of comeback.
Mm-hmm.
This is, after John Bonham died, the band got together with his son and did one show
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
at O2 Arena.
Yeah.
And it's pretty magical.
It was 2007.
2007.
I'm pretty sure it
Let's
was
see.
2007. Might have been 8. But I remember when it was announced that this was going to happen, they put like a lottery up for people to get tickets, because there were like basically 20,000 seats, maybe 30,000 seats. So they put like a lottery up for people to get the opportunity to buy the seats. And I obviously didn't win. I obviously didn't get to go.
Oh, you were in the...
Oh,
lottery?
yeah, I signed up for it.
Oh, that's so cool.
I'm like, if I can see Led Zeppelin, I am flying over to London to do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together then, but I would have found a way to do it if I got seats. I mean, when Page and Plant did their Walking into Clarksdale tour and their Unleaded tour, I probably saw them 6 times between those two. Just because I knew how important they were.
Yeah, and how monumental it was.
Yeah, and how
yeah.
unlikely it would be for them to do something like this.
Right.
Yeah. Now,
And the fact that they did this show, and it is good. It's not just, they really rehearsed and put a lot of energy, and I mean, they really tried.
yeah. Well, and the thing you have to remember is at the time that this happened, these guys are in their mid 60s.
Yeah.
Well, actually early 60s probably. And, Robert Plant's not going to be able to sing at 60 the way he did at 23.
Right.
So take it with a grain of salt, but it's kind of Led Zeppelin where they were then.
Yes.
And a document, not just the album. Is this 3 records?
It may be 4.
Let me see. It's a 3 LP set.
3.
Yeah. Sorry if we screwed up the shot again. So it's a 3 record live document, and there was a movie.
Yeah, the film.
The film
was really, I think the film was more of a forethought than the box set.
Yeah, yeah. But I since this got released, the design of it, the colors of it, everything about this is absolutely fantastic.
But it really put, not that, I don't know that Led Zeppelin has ever fallen out of favor, but they maybe weren't the first band people were thinking of.
Oh, no.
And this show kind of showed the world, hey, Led Zeppelin's still a very, very, very popular band. They may not still be together, but for this one night, you can see the band.
Popular band, vital band.
Vital.
And not just like a classic rock memory.
True.
You know, the thought after this that everybody had was that they would tour this. And the one, kink in that chain was that Robert Plant was having none of it.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
He basically said that he wanted to, didn't want to do that over again. And I understand because, performing these songs the way that people would expect him to would be a lot of work for just one night, let alone, 30-date tour. But he's done a lot of unbelievable stuff. I have to respect Robert Plant because he has collaborated with Alison Krauss. He's done his own thing since then, and I think he's really come into his own as an artist.
Yeah, and this show was really a greatest hits show.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. Trampled Underfoot, Stairway to Heaven, of course. The song remains the same, and then they ended up with Rock and Roll.
Yeah, there's so many good songs. It's a beautiful box set also.
Yeah, I have it too, and I was gonna bring it, but part of me thought we just talked about Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And then part of me thought, I bet Wheels brings.
That was good. It was a good thought.
So if you have the means, this thing pops up occasionally for a decent price. And if you have the means, it's definitely something to
highly
dig into.
Recommended.
Yeah. That's a good one, man. So my next one is The Next Day by David Bowie. And this was released in 2013. He kind of had retreated from the public at the time that this came out. He underwent surgery for a blocked artery in 2004, and this was his first studio release in a really long time. This is co-produced by Bowie and Tony Visconti, who I think did the Berlin albums with him too. So I think it's so interesting.
The album cover.
The cover. I mean, all they did was take the cover from Heroes, like Sharpie out Heroes, and put a square over his face on the cover and put The Next Day. It's so Bowie. It's not even.
It's so. Yeah, even the back.
Yeah, they did the same thing. I mean, I didn't really dig into why they did that, but I'm sure it was both a cost thing and just a crazy idea that David probably had.
I think it was probably a crazy idea David had.
Yeah. Considered primarily an art rock record, it references his earlier glam and funk releases, and the generally bleak lyrics draw from his reading of English and Russian history and examine themes of tyranny and violence. Now, I mean, it's not necessarily a record you're going to put on as a pick-me-up. When I started really getting back into vinyl, he was one of the first artists that I thought about. And I had quite a bit of his stuff on CD, but anything that I heard from him, like Diamond Dogs was one of the first records from him when I started this sickness again. And man, every time I listen to him on vinyl, it just sounds right.
Now, his early stuff is very much a lot like this. There's a lot of long, almost spoken word poetry.
Yeah. This was generally praised by critics. But in his later years, he would do... I mean, he wasn't doing the alter egos in the same way, but it seems like he was just challenging people more and more as he went on.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did a bunch of work with 9 Inch Nails and Trent Reznor. I think he did some stuff with Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
He was pushing the limits even in his older age.
Yeah. And it's David Bowie. We did the deep disc dive.
Yeah.
I went back to that and kind of scrubbed through that the other day. That's a really entertaining show.
It's a great show.
But I had to list this because, this is his second to last record before
Dark Star.
Black Star.
Black Star.
Yeah. And Black Star is just, it's so densely sad,
Yeah.
you know? But this kind of brought him back into the spotlight.
Yeah.
And
Because it was a comeback.
it was a comeback, and we're going to call it a comeback. So, you know what else? This is so recognizable. If
Yes.
you see it in a record store. The spine just has the next day
Yeah.
with the square on it. But, yeah, that's R.I.P. David.
That is a good one, and that one pops up on every list as well.
Yeah, yeah. We kind of curated the comeback lists because, you know, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of schools of thought on it. I think the ones that really stand out are the ones that you see in 3 or 4 of
Yes.
those lists. So
AC/DC, Back in Black.
yeah. This is the second one that I thought of. Also an A band.
Yes. I'm like, we should have had this before.
It should have. I mean, technically,
We should have
AC
led off
yeah,
with
AC,
this. But,
AC comes before AE, but I'll give you a pass on that.
okay.
So it's 1979, right?
Yes.
And Bon Scott passes away from a night of overindulging, and they just had their biggest hit with Highway to Hell,
Yeah.
which as an album, as a song, I mean, that's a great record.
Yeah. So Bon Scott passes away, and Brian Johnson fills the shoes. But it's not the end of days because their attitudes are different, but their voices are pretty darn close to similar.
They're similar. I mean, Brian's is more
Guttural. More
guttural
growly.
and gravelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was in a band called Geordie before this that I guess Bon Scott was a fan of.
Oh, okay.
And he had mentioned him to the band.
Yeah.
So had that not happened, they may not have, had that direct line to him.
Yeah.
But, Brian Johnson has said that he got the call and I think they recorded in the Bahamas. And, like 2 weeks later, he's there recording these songs and is taking smoke breaks. Of course, he smoked.
Yeah.
Taking smoke breaks and thinking this is never going to go over. He has said that he literally thought it would be a flop. And it was exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Of a flop.
It was almost, I think some of it stems from the world. I mean, Australia knew AC/DC really well before they broke in the world, but the world didn't know the band as well. Even though they'd had a hit, they were just still kind of a new, fresh flavor for most of the world.
Yeah.
And
This is like what is it? 50 million, 40 million
Oh, it was a massive seller.
seller. And the other thing is, if you go to any rock concert before the main band comes out, they're playing Back in Black or You Shook Me All Night Long.
Yeah, it's another album that's kind of a greatest hits album.
Yeah, Hell's Bells gets played all the time at football games and different athletic events. So this really is, for multiple generations, this is the AC/DC record.
Yes.
And, they came back stronger than ever, sold more records than they ever had after losing such a vital member like Bon.
Yeah, it truly is a comeback, but it's a comeback that catapulted the band to a whole new level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like they're almost two different bands
Yeah, they really are.
because of it. They're playing
In California, the
Power
one-
Trip.
Power Trip, the one Ozzy was
So they
pulled out of.
They're doing 2 bands a night on Power Trip, and the Saturday night was supposed to be AC/DC or Ozzy, then AC/DC, and then Ozzy pulled out because he can't perform.
Right.
So Judas Priest has taken over. So now it's going to be Judas Priest and AC/DC.
Yeah.
So that should be a hell of a show. We'll see. I
We'll
mean,
see.
that's why everybody's buying tickets for that night because of
Yeah.
AC/DC. I mean, they're the
draw.
the band out
Yeah.
of all of those Power Trip bands that hasn't played in like 7 years.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens for sure. I'm guessing they're gonna, take over the world again and do another tour.
It's not out of the realm of possibility.
No, but this is when you're talking about a comeback record. This absolutely qualifies on so many levels.
Without a doubt.
So
You're up. What you got?
I've got Roy Orbison's Mystery Girl.
Did this come out after the Traveling Wilburys?
It's actually Roy's 22nd record. It was his last album to be recorded during his lifetime. He completed the album in November of '88, a month before his death at age 52. So the Wilburys had done their first album
Yeah.
before this came out.
Okay. What's amazing is Roy was only, did you say 52?
Yeah.
He seems so old.
Didn't he seem so much older
Yeah.
than that? I mean, when you think about it, at the time of the Wilburys, and Keith, you can jump in here if you remember, how old was George? George and Roy and Bob were the older ones.
George would have been in his mid
40s. Yeah. I think Tom Petty was like 37.
So Tom was the baby?
Yeah. But, the whole Traveling Wilburys thing is such a cool story. And we need to do like a super group show.
Yes. I've thought about that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
But there's not many that are as organically just fantastic as the Wilburys were.
Yeah.
And it was such a surprise. Basically those guys came together to record B-sides for George Harrison for his album that may or may not come up here in a little bit. Then the record company basically hears those and says, well, you know what? You guys need to do a full record
Yeah.
of this stuff. But this is Mystery Girl, and the big song off of this is You Got It. And in the real world, Dream You, Love Is So Beautiful, California Blue, She's a Mystery, The Comedians, which is actually an Elvis Costello song, The Only One, Windsurfer, Careless Heart. It's just fantastic. It's a great record. There's a bunch of producers on here. Roy, Mike Campbell, who's Tom Petty's guitarist, Jeff Lynne, T-Bone Burnett, and Barbara Orbison. That's a tough one to say. And Bono.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Listed as a producer.
They all had fingers in the pie.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Jeff Lynne probably overall was leading the charge.
That makes sense.
But yeah, this is a great listen. His music is so packed with emotion, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's almost always sad.
Yeah.
And every time I think of this record and that song, it's like, okay, well then that's when we lost Roy, which you made the point, and I was going to say it. At the time he died, it seems like he was more than 52. I mean, he was 2.5 years older than I am right now.
Yeah, I cannot believe he was only 52.
Yeah, pretty crazy. But it's a good one, and I think, man, I didn't pay very much for this, but I got it like 8 or 9 years ago,
Yeah, I bet this is even one you can pick up at record shows for a reasonable price.
Yeah, yeah. But, R.I.P. Roy. It's too bad we're R.I.P.ing so many folks. What's next?
Well, let's keep the
Oh yeah.
we'll keep the RAPs going. Nobody's dead, but
No.
the band's dead.
Yeah. Yeah. They exploded their helmets.
They exploded their helmets. And Daft Punk,
Yeah.
Random Access Memories.
Your
And-
kind of band.
Yes, without a doubt. And it was funny. They'd had some big hits,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, they weren't big hits. They were big hits in the dance world.
Yeah,
I mean,
EDM.
people knew who they were,
Mm-hmm.
but this album kind of launched them into the mainstream.
Yeah. Yeah. With Nile Rodgers and Pharrell Williams, and it's a great record. I mean, you've had this for a bit, right?
Yeah,
I
have.
just got this like last year. It came down because it was always expensive.
Oh yeah, it still is up there. I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard to find it for.
Less than $40.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's a good one though.
Yeah, it came out in 2007. Or no, this came out in 2013.
Oh, okay. So what? 9 years ago.
Yeah,
Sheesh.
because 2007 was when they had a Grammy-winning live album.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Huh.
So, and they were always a band that they were more DJs than a band, you know, so they would play constantly and tour. That was how they, you know, the fact that they wound up as recorded music is kind of like a modern thing, you know.
Yeah.
They were just really DJs.
No, that's crazy. And Nile Rodgers, big,
Yeah.
big part of this record. I mean, that Get Lucky song, man.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great one. Look at this. Look at this big old square.
Ooh, I knew you'd like it. And
Hype sticker.
See, it's featuring Get
Yeah.
Lucky and Lose Yourself to a Dance.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna turn this back around because I like seeing their space helmets.
Yeah, the helmets are great. And I love the way they ended it.
Mm-hmm.
They just blew up the helmets.
Yeah, over with.
Yeah.
I still say there's no such thing as a band that is done. Not in today's world.
No,
I mean, maybe these guys.
they may. I think these guys would say this one's done. And if they wanted to get back together and do anything new,
Yeah.
they'd do it as something else.
You think?
Yeah.
It could be. I mean, anything else in the world of pop music, when you see the two words farewell tour, you may as well just take your wallet out and just open it up. You may as well give the band your social security number because it's there's no such thing. I was at Kiss's farewell tour in 2000, 2001,
Yeah.
and they're still doing it.
It's never over till it's over.
Back to our first record we talked about, Aerosmith, they're doing this Peace Out tour. I mean, if there's a band I can imagine actually sticking to the farewell tour, it would be Aerosmith. I mean,
Yeah.
there's been, as of late, like in the last 8-9 years, Aerosmith, there's been a lot of strife between them. There's big personalities in all these bands.
Yeah. And they're doing a lot of other things
Yeah.
besides music.
Yeah. I mean, Steven Tyler did the American Idol thing.
Yeah.
And at the time, there's a lot of interesting stories. I know we're not talking about them. I had also heard that there was a search for someone to replace Steven for them to tour live because when he decided to do American Idol, the band wanted to go out.
Oh,
So they auditioned other singers to,
interesting.
yeah. We should do a show on dysfunctional bands.
Oh, wow.
I feel like we could do an entire...
But that would be the whole collection.
Yeah, we could do the entire series of this show on that.
Yeah, you just start picking out albums and everyone's dysfunctional.
If you find a functional one, we could do a show on that.
That's true.
That's a good point.
In case you couldn't hear that, Keith said the norm is dysfunction, so a functional band would be the one to do it on. That's a great point. Anyway, anything else on RAM, as I like to call it?
No, it's just a brilliant album if you like dance music, and it's really fun to listen to.
It's a nice, like, relaxing record.
Yeah, it's
put
not
on.
like a dance, like you're not like, yeah, not dance party, but it's just
Okay, we're
good,
gonna have
smooth
to. Can you do that
dancing.
again to that camera? No, it's atmospheric.
Atmospheric. That's
is a
perfect.
good way to
That's
put it.
a great description.
Right? Yeah. Well, my next one is kind of considered a comeback album for this guy, Elton.
Oh, yeah.
Songs from the West Coast. I love the cover of this with the bird and the booth and Elton with his jacket. I love the jacket. It's great. This is again a collaboration with Bernie Taupin, and it marks the first time that the pair had written together in person, which is interesting when you think about it. I mean, Bernie writes lyrics and sends them to Elton, and he puts some music to it.
It was the first time they'd written together in person?
I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Its release date was October 1, 2001. And the singles are I Want Love, This Train Don't Stop There Anymore, which is one of my favorites, and Original Sin, another great song. This is not mid-70s Elton,
Yeah.
but he took some detours through the 80s for different stuff. And this is kind of a return to form for him. And I love it. On the back, there's a picture out the window of these cops arresting this guy, which is just great.
Outside the diner.
Yeah, yeah. But, you know, if you took Elton's classic records and put them in one stack and then put his more contemporary stuff in another stack, I guarantee you that I'm listening to the classic stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But this is one of the really good, more contemporary. Now it's 21 years old, 22 years old.
That's
but
amazing.
It's a really good Elton record. And it's not that, I think I've had this for 2 or 3 years. It's not that expensive either. So,
Did you think about this? He's in a diner.
Mm-hmm.
Why is a bird in the diner?
well, he's getting ready to have some chicken or fowl.
Yeah, it's definitely not a chicken. But
Yeah. No.
but I mean, birds are not the most sanitary animals.
No. Maybe he's got an avian thing.
He's not happy about it. He's looking at the bird like this bird, and the bird's like, I'm not looking at you.
See, this just drives home the fact that we need to do the Wheels Interprets album art show for sure.
I'm worried about the bird in the diner because after it leaves Elton, it's going to go to other patrons and,
What are you more worried about, the bird, or are you worried about the people?
Well, I think I've got the explanation,
Okay.
actually.
Okay.
So here's what happened.
Yeah.
This dude brought a bird into the diner. And they complained and they arrested him.
I don't know. It's songs from the West Coast, so it's likely Los Angeles. I thought that kind of thing went.
Well, that's the songs, but that's what happened.
Yeah, if you get a chance, give it a listen. And if you have an aversion to aviary stuff, just put a big square over the cover like David Bowie.
Yeah.
They took the guy away, but they left the bird.
They left the bird. Well, they couldn't catch the bird.
Yeah, you're not going to catch a bird, especially in a diner.
The bird's still on the seat in the back.
Because the bird's going to fly off when the waitress comes by to refill your
Yeah.
coffee.
It's just, it's flighty.
Yeah. What's your next one?
Yes.
C, 90125. That's such a good record, man. Owner of a Lonely Heart.
And this was truly, if you think about band comebacks, this was truly a comeback.
Yeah.
Because the band in, when did it come out?
3?
83. They were no longer the prog rock favorite of the 70s. Music was changing. It was more poppy, and new wave was coming in. A lot of electronics were coming in, and it just wasn't, people didn't want to listen to 7-minute songs.
No, it's not that people didn't like Yes anymore. People just the taste for music, because of those reasons that we talked about, radio and MTV, that taste for music changed, and it changed bands. This is such a good album. Do you know, I think I've talked about this before, but you know where the album title comes from?
Isn't it a zip code? And
No, look at the UPC, the last 5 digits of the UPC.
it's the UPC.
Isn't that crazy?
That's nice.
So, Owner of a Lonely Heart opens this. Hold On, It Can Happen. That was another hit from this. And you know what? That's a 5-minute and 40-second song. Our Song, City of Love, Hearts. It's a great record.
Yeah, there's still longer songs, but they're more concise, I guess.
Yeah, more listener friendly.
Yeah, there's not as many long solos.
Yeah.
But they extended an olive branch to John Anderson to get him back.
Yeah.
So it was truly a comeback on many levels.
Yeah. And then the record they did after this, it didn't shoot up the charts, but it was also successful too.
Yeah. But this was a multi-platinum record. It was getting a lot of radio play, which was kind of unusual for the time. It's like, wow, who is this band?
Yeah, I
Because
remember.
the songs really didn't even they had a flavor of the old Yes, but they didn't sound like what you would think Yes songs should sound like.
It was definitely more polished
Yes.
sounding. I mean, their stuff being proggy, not that it wasn't polished, but I remember, man, I was 9 when this came out, and I was carrying a radio around all the time.
Yeah.
And this song was on a loop, 4 or 5 times a day you'd hear it on the radio.
This was their 11th album.
11th, okay. 83, so... Yeah, because I think their first album was 69, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's...
So they were in their technically third decade of existence.
Crazy. That is just crazy. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't have this.
Oh, because this came out in 83, everybody had this.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably a Columbia House record.
Oh, really?
I would not be a bit surprised.
Huh. Yeah. It's a good one, man. John Anderson, to me, John Anderson is the voice
Yes.
of Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. We could also do a show on replacement members. It's interesting where that is accepted and where it's not. You know what I mean? There's so many arguments for and against having replacement members. It almost seems contradictory. Like, does it work? Does it not? Is it half the time that it works? What we may talk about another record here before we're done about, that has a replacement member that worked pretty well.
We very well could. The last thing I want to say about this, it had the band's first number 1 hit. I mean, they'd been around for
14 years.
14 years, and this was their first number 1 hit.
Yeah.
And they were huge on the concert series in the 70s.
Well, when you think about a lot of those bands from the 60s and 70s, obviously those decades were a totally different feel.
Right. Completely.
But, we could name a bunch off. Another one that comes to mind is Starship and Jefferson Starship.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd think that bands like this were sunk by the 80s, and some were, but some others managed to transform, and Yes is one of them, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's another way of saying yes.
C. 90125 UPC,
Yes.
UPC code. I think that's funny. You got all these dudes that are in this traditionally prog rock band, and they can't come up with a goddamn title.
Or they couldn't agree on a title.
That's probably
so
more
a
like it.
producer said, just use the UPC code.
Because those just started to be, used at the time.
What's next in the oeuvre?
I'm having a hard time picking.
You're having a hard time finding. Oh, look at that.
Speaking of replacement members, I figured it would be appropriate.
Very apropos.
I don't know how many years ago it was that I bought this, but this is a 1980 press for $15, and I'm guessing it's long enough ago that when I saw that $15, I was like, that hurts a little. This is Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath, and it's one of the coolest record covers ever. You got these 3 angels taking a smoke break.
Playing cards. This one has a very good hand.
Yeah, for sure. She's looking up to the heavens, thanking for the great hand. I always loved this like chalk drawing of the band on the back. I mean, first off, the first song on here, Neon Nights, absolutely a banger, or banger if you're from Maine. Children of the Sea is another standout on here. But the big point is you have an enormous band, game-changing band like Black Sabbath with a singer like Ozzy. And, there were all kinds of problems, drugs, alcohol, personalities. And so Ozzy's basically kicked out of the band, and they bring Ronnie in. And I think that at that time, because I think this is before Back in Black. So at that time, I don't think a major, or at least not too many major singers had been replaced with success.
Yeah.
So here comes Ronnie James Dio teaming up with Tony Iommi to write these songs, and they just knock it out of the damn park. I mean, it's a great record.
And you know that Ronnie is the new member, no facial hair, no mustache.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Bill's got quite a
Well, Bill's all on Mountain
beard.
Man.
Yeah. And then Geezer
And
Tony
are like undercover cops.
Yeah, they maybe narcs. Maybe they look like narcs.
Yeah.
They look like guys that would, go to a concert in jeans and a black leather vest and, just hang around and just wait for somebody to spark up. No, it's a great record, man. So they did this, and then they did Mob Rules. And then Ronnie left the band. And then Black Sabbath went on to have like 6 other singers.
It's amazing when bands can do that.
Yeah, but they were kind of ahead of their time. Let me read you a little about this. If you had to guess, what number album for Black Sabbath would you think this is?
Ooh. Somewhere around 10.
9.
9.
Yeah, it's their 9th record. I never would have guessed that. This came out April 18th, 1980. And it's obviously the first to feature Ronnie. It's always been a favorite. And I love Ronnie too. As I've gotten older, I've come to love him. I think in the 80s when I would see, there was one dude that went to our high school. I'm not going to name his name, but he wore Dio shirts all the time. And the Dio logo, supposedly, if you turned it upside down, said devil. And at the time you had the PMRC and all the Tipper Gore who killed
Zappa.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You're not going to get me started on Tipper.
We should do a show about that. We should do a short about that. But I would see that, and I bought into that, like, oh, it's satanic or the devil. Not at all. Neither was Black Sabbath. All of these guys are actually pretty, reasonably religious dudes. But as we've talked about, a lot of bands will glom on to those things that are going to get them press. No press is bad press.
True.
So I love Ronnie, and I've come to appreciate his solo stuff so much more. He had great guitarists in his stuff too, Vivian Campbell and Rowan Robertson, and I could go on and on and on and bore you guys all to death. But this is probably the second or third record I thought of when we decided to do this show.
That's a good one. And it serves the show well. It truly is a comeback.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
What's your next comeback that you're not going to call a comeback?
Well, kind of the same thing, but different.
Oh, yeah.
The Foo Fighters.
Absolutely. I didn't even think about this. Was this on any of the lists?
It may have been on a couple because I was looking for alternative.
That's an out-of-the-box call, dude.
And, okay, so Nirvana ends.
Yeah.
And nobody at the time would think, hey, the drummer's going to start a band and it's going to be one of the biggest bands in the world.
No, I remember I worked in a record store at the time, and I remember hearing that he was doing this. And I remember when this came out. And frankly, I'm not a huge fan of this. Their second record I really liked. I think their second was Color in the Shape.
Yep.
But I remember having the thought that, like, what? I think it was very fresh at the time because Kurt died in April of 94.
Yep.
And then this came out when? Later in 94?
I believe so. I didn't even write that down.
Holy shit, that is some small print. Well, you go ahead and keep talking. I'll look it up.
It was not this record didn't have any big massive hits. Color and Shape had really put them on the map as the big hit.
Big Me was a pretty big hit. Because
they were big hits. They weren't like major, but I did have a chance because I missed out on seeing Nirvana, so I saw this show.
Did you?
And if you remember from the music video, there were people throwing Skittles.
No, they were Mentos.
Mentos. So people would throw Mentos when that song, and it happened live, and the band invited it.
But that's what I'm saying. The Big Me video was kind of a takeoff of that Mentos
Yeah,
commercial.
it was a
and
rip-off.
but they were called Futos,
Futos,
if
yeah.
you remember. Why is that shit?
That's amazing that you remember all
Why is that shit stored up here? I mean, I don't even like the record. Anyway, this came out in June of 95.
June of 9. Okay.
Yeah. It is impressive. There are not a lot of examples of a drummer becoming the front man of a band and then becoming the biggest band in the world. Because I think, honestly, even before Taylor died, they were the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
They were like...
Besides Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is number one, and then...
Yeah, but I mean, I think they're two totally different things, too.
Yeah.
I mean, Taylor is an artist and an individual. I think bands are very different things. For one reason, I've been in bands, and I know just how dysfunctional they are. You're not talking about one personality. You're talking about 4, 5, 6. And just for them to have the rise that they have, and it's just gone up and up and up. Now, I mean, they were put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I think, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Which I think is ridiculous. When you have bands on the sideline like Boston and Foreigner, and, you know, a lot of these bands have members that are gone.
Let's get those in there.
Yeah. I really feel strongly about that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do. I'm not saying they're not worthy. It's just, I think it exposes the attitude of an organization like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They're putting bands in here like this to put butts in the seats at the ceremonies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're striking while the iron's hot, which you can understand, but I have no interest in seeing a band inaugurated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame where 3 of the 5 members are dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It makes it a little less of an award.
Yeah.
And more of a posthumous.
Right. And it's just a bummer. I mean, I know that that's a sidetrack, but this is such a great call, dude. I mean,
and the good thing with this, I mean, in a way, this was a Dave Grohl solo album. The album. Now the tour, he had a touring band, but the album was pretty much Grohl just playing.
Yeah. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And like I said, amazing. Yeah, there are no other examples that come to mind of a drummer starting his own band and then just becoming as huge as they have. And they just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
You know?
And the drummer becoming the front man and moving off of drums.
And playing guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, it does speak volumes to how talented he is.
Yes.
And I've said before, I think he's the mayor of rock and roll.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. He should wear a sash like the mayor in The Simpsons does. It just says mayor of rock and roll. That's your next solo album title, Dave. You can thank Vinyl Ventures.
Mayor of
That's
rock
such a great choice, man.
That was a fun one.
Yeah. That's almost as fun as having a 3B with Aerosmith and Run DMC.
Yes.
All right. What's next?
You're up.
No, I'm not going to do Europe because they never really had a comeback. This is a fun one.
Oh, yeah.
Lick It Up by Kiss. It's the 11th record by Kiss. 1983. Kiss's first record came out in 1974. So in 9 years, they put 11 records out. We've talked about that 2 records in a year thing before. This band was on just a steady uptick through the 70s. And like the height of their popularity in the 70s was 77, 78. And then the wheels started coming off. And they got to records like Unmasked and The Elder, where only 2 of these dudes were actually playing, but it said that it was the original 4 dudes. I mean, all the way to Creatures of the Night before this, it still showed Ace as a part of the band.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, they held on to that because there was a thing about the original people. And, that if you look back on it now, you get it. but it was kind of disingenuous because it had different dudes playing on the album, but still picturing those original guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is the record that kind of brought this band back, and the song Lick It Up was huge.
Oh, yeah.
They'd gotten rid of the makeup, which was a huge thing for this album. And if you think about how much a part of Kiss that makeup is, it's really crazy to think that they took the makeup off
Yes.
and were able to retain any kind of an audience through the 80s. I mean, it got a little iffy in the 80s, but this is the album that brought them back. You know, Ace left after Peter left a couple years before then and was replaced by Eric Carr, and then they get Vinnie Vincent to come in, who at the time in 1982, 83 was a shredder of a guitar, you know, not necessarily from the Eddie Van Halen school, but able to play like that. And I never saw them on this tour, and I've never really even watched that much video, but I have heard that the band really struggled. They wanted that shredder type guitar, but when he would do that in shows, it would piss Gene and Paul off. You know, because probably because it was taking the spotlight away from them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But, you know, this album has some great songs. Starts with Exciter, Not for the Innocent, Lick It Up, Young and Wasted, Gimme More, All Hell's Breaking Loose, that's a good song. 1,000,000 to 1, Fits Like a Glove, Dance All Over Your Face, and On the Eighth Day. And the other thing that I think is really interesting about this album cover is that these dudes are dressed in their black and leather, and here's Vinny in his purple button-up shirt.
Yeah. It's
so odd. Anyway, this is really, if you think back in history, this is the album that kind of allowed Kiss to like get their fingernails in and hold on for the ride that the 80s became.
that is for sure a comeback.
Yeah.
If for nothing else, the removal of the makeup.
Yeah. I mean, you lose two very popular members, and then you take the makeup off, and then you're able to parlay that into a hit single.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
And to think they haven't been together with the classic members longer than they were with the classic members.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of mind-blowing.
I mean, the two guys that are in the band with Gene and Paul now have been in the band longer than Ace and Peter ever were combined.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah. I mean, I think that speaks to what people want from Kiss,
yeah.
right? Because after the reunion tours and their farewell tour, you know, after that, they understandably never took the makeup back off.
Yeah.
Even though those two guys left the band again. It's such a soap opera. They should do like a telenovela about Kiss.
It still may happen.
Yeah, it could. It could. So Lick It Up, folks.
All right. So the next one I have, John Lennon, Yoko Ono, Double Fantasy. So this is less of it's both a comeback and a farewell, because this was Lennon's very last album.
Mm-hmm.
And really everything post-Beatles, nothing really grabbed huge. But when this came out in 80, it was big.
Mm-hmm. I've just it's interesting. Keith and I have actually had this discussion. It's all of the other guys' solo stuff. Well, I mean, Paul and George, I think both did some amazing solo stuff. Ringo did here and there, but Ringo kind of came off then and now as more of a crooner. You know what I mean?
He just it wasn't the same kind of music that the Beatles produced.
Right. And you know what? The Beatles threw him bones through their career for him to have something to be featured on, which you got to respect. It's funny that they did that for Ringo and understood that Ringo was not just a member and not just a drummer, but he was a character
Yeah.
in the band. And then here's George, languishing album after album with all these great songs that he's written, and they're just not giving him the opportunity to have him on the album. I had no idea this was Geffen Records, first off. Yeah, his stuff never really grabbed. I mean, there are records of Lennon's solo stuff that I do like. And this has got some great songs on it.
Yeah.
Just like Starting Over. What's the other big one? Nobody Told Me. No, that's after.
Beautiful Boy.
Beautiful Boy. Is there any other example of like somebody who's that huge of a star that drew their partner in to the fray? There's probably not.
I can't think of one.
Yeah. I mean, Paul and Linda, but I don't think Linda became is huge.
True.
And as ever present as Yoko did.
But I think a lot of this, so Lennon had been on an extended break from music. He was just kind of doing other things. I mean, I think
being a dad.
Yeah, and pretty much post Beatles, he was done with it. He was ready to put it on a shelf. He still did music, but anyhow, he started listening to the Pretenders, the B-52s, and it was an inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to get on that train.
Isn't that cool? I mean, I love the Pretenders and the B-52s.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I realize how great they were.
It's cool to me that those bands were inspirations for John Lennon to put out his kind of biggest solo album.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. When? 1980?
Yeah, this came out in 80, and then Lennon was shot in 80.
Oh, man.
December 8th.
Woman's on here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it encapsulates everything that Lennon's post-Beatles life was.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a great record.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, especially when you consider the timing.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah. That's awesome. And that comes up on a few lists. Not all of them.
Not all of them.
Yeah.
Because it's like, is it a comeback? It is, but it isn't. It's a comeback. It's a goodbye.
Yeah.
I should have saved it for last.
It's hello, goodbye.
Hello, goodbye. See what you did there? That's comedy. Next up,
we'll stick with the Beatles theme. I got this for $4 when I bought it.
$4 American.
$4 American, folks. And they put the goddamn sticker on the cover. Man, that's not cool. So, this is George's 11th solo record.
Really?
Yeah. Came out in 1987 after Harrison had taken a 5-year hiatus from his career as a solo artist. And the big hit single on this, Got My Mind Set on You, reestablished him as a critically acclaimed, commercially significant recording guy. It was his last studio album released during his lifetime. And his next album, Brainwashed, was released in 2002. And that was released almost a year after he died. He had recorded this stuff, but never got everything put together.
Yeah.
So when he passed away, Jeff Lynne and Danny Harrison assembled that album and put it together. And that's another great George Harrison record.
Yeah.
But this kind of brought him back into the fold. And as we spoke about earlier, this album is the reason for the genesis of the Traveling Wilburys, which revived all those guys' careers when you think about it. Jeff Lynne's career was kind of pushed to the fore because he was known more as a producer after that. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers only got more popular after that. Dylan has been ever present almost since the 80s.
Yeah, we could probably pick, every decade has a Dylan comeback album.
Yeah, I mean, I would have brought Time Out of Mind, but I don't have it.
Yeah.
But, this was huge for George Harrison. And I think it's Keith that has told me that this is, that Traveling Wilburys experience, because of this, kind of got George back into the wanting to be in a band.
Yeah.
And longing for his Beatles days. There's so many good songs on here. I mean, the big one has Got My Mind Set on You. Fish on the Sand is a favorite. When We Was Fab. The song's about the whole Beatles experience, and it sounds like it could have been a Beatles tune. I absolutely love that song. I don't even listen to Got My Mind Set on You when I listen to this. Devil's Radio, another highlight. The other strange thing about this record is it always felt like there was more of a heaviness to George's solo stuff. All of them had the sappy love songs, but George just seemed like there was more of a depth.
More
there.
thought.
More thought, Eastern philosophical stuff, whatever you want to call it. But this album has an uplifting spirit to it. And that really, at the time, attracted me to it because the other stuff I'd heard from him really didn't have that. I mean, his solo stuff is kind of up and down, but just an amazing artist. And it's crazy to think that, what did we say? I think he was in his mid-40s at the time that he did this, or early 40s.
Yeah.
These guys just seemed so much older than that at the time.
Yeah, they really did.
I bought a new copy of this, like a better copy of this. I was at Barnes & Noble one day 4 or 5 years ago, and they had like the re-release of this on Dark Horse Records, like marked half off. And I'm like, hell yes.
I'll take that.
And I love the cover too. And it was years, because I originally had this on CD, it was years until I realized that his sunglasses are covered in aluminum foil.
Yeah.
Because of the flash.
I was trying to remember, you told me that one other time, and I'm like, now, wait a minute,
It's
what
like,
is it?
It's like something you don't notice at all until you do. And then when you see it, you can't unsee
You can't.
it.
That's the only thing you look at.
Yeah, yeah. But R.I.P. George.
All right, so next.
I think we have 2 more each, don't we?
Yes.
Oh, what
Next.
a great record.
Oh, you got to put the front up.
Yeah.
It's not even opened
No.
because I have it on CD.
How long ago did you get it?
I don't know. It popped up on sale, and it's one I've always wanted, and I have on CD, so it's like.
This is one that I'd like to have.
Yeah.
For sure. This definitely is kind of a comeback album. But, again, U2 has done that multiple times over their careers.
Yeah, I mean, you could put Rattle and Hum in the same vein, but All That You Can't Leave Behind really was a comeback because after they'd just kind of fallen out of radio favor. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't, they were producing great music, but it just wasn't something that people were buying a lot of.
Right.
And this changed everything. They took a lot of chances in the 90s with pop and Zeropa and all these different directions. Mm-hmm. And this was more back to U2, the band everybody loved.
Yeah. Speaking of, I remember when pop came out. I worked in a record store, and we'd have the in-store CD to play. Man, I just really don't like that album.
Oh, really?
You like pop?
Not particularly. I mean, I don't.
Sorry to interrupt you, but my thought is there are a lot of bands that I think can like do that disco kind of thing, and I don't think U2 is one of them. I mean, they've got that R&B flavor. There's that underlying R&B flavor too. Yeah. I just don't think it matched well, but it sold.
Yeah, you can, and I think it sold because the band was so popular. Mm-hmm. And that's, this is more of a, I guess, less of a comeback than a homecoming.
Mm-hmm. Or a back to basics.
A back to basics.
Mm-hmm.
This was, and it was produced by Lanois and Eno.
Yeah.
So, when you have legendary producers encouraging the band, hey,
yeah,
this is what you need to do. Yeah. And they knew that, hey, if we can get the band back to sounding the way they used to sound,
it'll be successful.
And it was huge. This thing was a massive success.
The big song on here is Beautiful Day, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also Stuck in a Moment You Can't Get Out Of.
And I like that the best song on here is the first song on the first side.
Yeah. That's a great song.
I hate it when the hit singles are buried.
Right.
It should be one of the first 3 songs.
Yeah, but they're just trying to get you to dig in.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so much harder to do that with a record.
Oh, yeah.
I think we kind of lost touch with when we talked on Keith's episode about the Beatles and the album. I mean, there was real thought put into track listing and where the singles were. And, as the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s came through, the move from vinyl to CD really changed that.
Yeah.
It was so much more effort to drop that needle in the middle of the record than it was to just play it from the beginning.
Yeah.
And on a CD, you just cue it up.
Skip track.
Yeah, boom. This is a great album, and I really want to get it. I have always loved the cover in the back.
Oh,
cover.
yeah. I love the cover.
They're just waiting at the airport.
Waiting at the airport to do the homecoming for the comeback.
There you go. They're probably flying to Dublin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
It's a great
It's
one.
a good one.
Gosh, I remember it was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I would see that pop up. Wait a minute. What year was it that it originally came out?
2000.
Okay, so that came out in 20 because that's the 20th anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did it say that? I
Yep.
didn't even know.
The hype sticker did.
You and the hype stickers.
See the hype sticker, folks. There's useful stuff on there if you pay attention to it. That's a great call, man.
Yeah, that was one that I'd been looking for. I'm not as into U2 as I was one time, but I knew I had to have that one. And what do you have? Oh, yeah.
So, Long Road Out of Eden, which is the Eagles record, this damn thing came out in 2007. It's 15 years old, right?
I remember when this came out.
Almost 16 years old. It's their first ever double album. They took 6 years to produce this, and it was their first studio album since 1979's The Long Run. Can you guess where this falls in their releases, what number it is?
I'm staying with the traditional 10.
This is only their 7th.
Only 7th?
Yeah. I mean, they've got greatest hits, they've got live albums, but their 7th studio album. Isn't that nutty for a band to be around that long?
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
They really made a living on each album.
If any band has made a living on both record sales and ticket sales and royalties and all of that, it's these guys. This is a Walmart press of this. Walmart is doing that thing where they're selling bands records with something inside it to be kind of a big deal. It's a reproduction of a tour laminate. They did the same thing with the Led Zeppelin records. Their versions of the Led Zeppelin catalog have like tour repro of the tour laminates in it. But this was a pretty highly anticipated record. There's one big song on here that I just love. It's called How Long, and I think that was the lead-off single. But we've had this discussion recently. It's a double album. I mean, it took them 6 years to record this, and it's a double record, and there's definitely some good stuff on it. And it's the last appearance of Glenn Frey on a studio record by the Eagles.
Yeah, I've listened to this album. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not one that, I mean, if it comes up cheap, I'd probably buy it, but it's not one that I have to have.
Right. I mean, I was very excited about this when it came out. I was in an Eagles phase at the time,
Yeah.
And it took forever for it to come out, but it's a good one for sure. But it certainly it kind of brought them back to the forefront. They had done the reunion in 94. They reunited. So really they were only broken up for like 13 or 14 years. And they did that, then they started touring, and then did different live records, different greatest hits. So it was a long time between 94 and 07 when they did another album together, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
But
it truly is a comeback.
Yeah. So it's kind of their hello and goodbye because Glenn's gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love, there's definitely some songs I love on there. I love the cover. The cover is very cool.
It's a great cover.
It looks like an Eagles cover.
It does, without a doubt. Well, we're staying in the Beatles land.
Band on the Run, that's gotten some play.
Well, the vinyl is really good.
Yeah.
I was looking for a used copy with something that wasn't owned by people with claws. And this vinyl was the first one I found that I mean, the cover's beat,
Yeah.
but the vinyl is splendid.
That's awesome. That's such a good record too, man.
And I mean, you know, as we've talked about the Beatles, post-Beatles careers, Paul really hadn't released anything that was Beatles-like or radio, you know, that people wanted to hear from him. But when this came out, oh, it was.
Yeah. What year did this come out?
This came out.
Is it 1973?
Yeah.
Yep, December of 73. They just got it in there.
Yeah, they just barely made it. So, you know, the 70s had reached its halfway point. Paul had not really done anything big. His plan was to go to Nigeria to record this. And by the time they got to Nigeria, half the band had quit.
Why did they go to Nigeria?
I don't know.
Was it like going to India with the Beatles?
You know, it's one of those things you want to do something different.
Mix it up.
Yeah. Let's go to Africa.
It's interesting when artists get that notion, you know, if there's a struggle to come up with creative ideas, or you just want inspiration from places that you don't normally get it. So they planned to go to Nigeria, and they did.
But it was pretty much a bust. It was like, you know, Paul, Linda, and one other dude.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I mean, this has always been a favorite of his catalog to me. I love the back.
And I think that's why those three are on there, because that was pretty much the band that survived the Nigeria trip.
Yeah. They became Wings.
Yes.
Yeah. That kind of got Paul back into the feel of a band.
Yeah.
I've always thought it was interesting because Wings was always Paul McCartney to me.
Yeah.
You know, not
Yeah.
Paul
It really
McCartney and Wings.
Yeah.
The way that some of these songs run into each other is very reminiscent of the Beatles and what they did later in their career too. But
it was very radio friendly.
Yeah. Band on the Run, Jet.
Yeah.
Just there's some
Jet sounds like it came off a Beatles album for sure.
It kind of does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always loved the cover. I've always loved the theme of this album. I think I've told you before, but for years I thought it was Man on the Run. You know, the misheard lyrics thing.
Yeah. It's one that I felt like had to be on here just because it was kind of Paul's return to maybe creativity. And maybe that's, you know, like you said, it had worked for him before going to India, and so he tried a different continent.
Yeah. Like kind of a springboard for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
You know, his other stuff here and there, the stuff he recorded in his basement, you know, there's good and there's not so good stuff. But this really was. And you know what? I got Wingspan, which probably came out 15 or 20 years ago, like a greatest hits of Wings stuff. And man, there was a lot of good stuff there too.
Well, yeah, when you're I don't know for sure how long Wings existed, but long enough to have greatest hits. You know, they were a band for the better part of the late 70s.
Yeah. And you know, it's just amazing that these dudes had accomplished as much as they had, but when the end of the Beatles came, they had so much more of their career to go.
Yeah.
Which kind of blows your mind to think of young men doing that much, becoming that successful and rich, you know, worldwide at such a young age.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So you got another one.
I do. David Lee Roth leaves Van Halen in 1985. Struggle, strife. This, to me, is one of the biggest comeback albums. Examples, at least in recent history, even though it's been, 35 years, 37 years?
Yeah, it's very much like the AC/DC.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Dave didn't die, for sure. And Dave went on to great solo success, too.
Yeah.
But I remember when Dave left Van Halen, I was distraught because I had just, you know, the last few years I had just dug in and I'd really become a huge fan of those albums. And the thought of Van Halen without David Lee Roth just didn't make sense in my head at all. So this comes out March 24th, 1986. And I think this might be the first like record that I took my own money and bought at a store.
Really?
Yeah, on cassette.
On cassette, yeah.
Yeah, because by that time I had a Walkman. It
Yeah.
had to be.
You had to have portable music.
Yeah, which it's amazing how much that changed the world and the industry. I was talking with a guy at Crossroads about that. But this came out, and the lead single is Why Can't This Be Love? And that was just all over the radio. The other singles were Dreams, Love Walks In, and Best of Both Worlds. It can't be overstated how Sammy brought a polish and a songwriting capability to this band that was never there before.
Yeah.
And it just allowed them to reach into places that David Lee Roth and the band never went. It's certainly a huge comeback album, even though it was only like a year and a half, or maybe even less than that they were singerless.
Yeah.
In the story, how they got together with Sammy is I think they had a mutual mechanic, and one of Sammy's Ferraris was there, and Eddie was there having one of his cars fixed, and the mechanic said, "Oh, that's Sammy Hagar's car," and that's how it happened.
Well, but I mean, Sammy Hagar was not an unknown.
Oh no.
I mean, he was a big guy. This almost became a miniature super group.
Yeah, kind of, because I mean, with VOA and I Can't Drive 55, I mean, he just had the best year of his career.
Yeah.
And the most successful album. And the funny thing is, when he joined the band, he had just gotten done touring VOA. He cut all his hair off because he's like, getting rid of the hair for a while. I'm going to take a break. And then he joins one of the biggest rock bands in the world.
Yeah.
So it's just a great story. I love the Sammy era of Van Halen, just like I love the Dave era.
Yeah.
They're just two different bands, but they went on after this to have some hugely successful
Oh yeah.
singles and albums. And then, of course, then Sammy leaves the band. And they get another replacement singer. We will have to do a show on replacement singers.
Yeah, we've covered some of them, but there are tons out there.
There really
that we
are.
haven't even.
And it's just like
it's
just like the Canadian show, man. I mean, you don't think of all of them until you start searching for it. Well, it's great to do comeback albums because it's a positive feel. It's like these bands, they could have gone either way. And almost every example of this, the bands just continued to rise, which is great. Some of the best music that we've had is probably because of that ability, that open-mindedness for these bands to say, hey, we got a different singer, or our last singer died. We need to keep going.
What are we going to put? Let's do a top of the heap.
Okay.
What's our number one?
5150 is the biggest. I bet I could argue with myself because I think I know what you're going to say instead.
I can live with 5150, but I mean, number two would be Back in Black.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's for sure.
What else do you think?
I think those two.
Yeah.
That's 1 and 2, and it can be flipped either way.
Yeah, we could argue all day about it. I mean, when you think about the unlikeliness of the Aerosmith and Run DMC thing too, that's pretty monumental.
It's monumental, but not as much as these two.
Yeah. I mean, the Aerosmith and Run DMC thing is so deep in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
It's a totally different thing. But yeah, I think that AC/DC, and they're next to the Stones, they're the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
Right now. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Power Trip and how that moves forward. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man.
It's been a cool show.
It's been a lot of fun talking about these comebacks. We want you guys to come back and see us every time we do a new show. And we also want you to like, subscribe, comment, and share our stuff on our YouTube page, because I'll tell you what, man, I was going through it yesterday. There's a lot of stuff on there. There's a lot of really great stuff. We can't tell you how much we thank Keith Toombs and Jacob Hansen for helping us step up that side of the podcast. We're still trying to do podcasts about every 3 weeks, and we've done it for like the last 3 or 4. But please subscribe, like, comment, share. Come to the record shows that we're doing live hits from. Come to record stores in your little town, your big city. Do all of that stuff. Support those local guys, because they're the reason that this vinyl thing has kind of like had a new life. But we can't thank you all enough for tuning in and listening and doing all those things on our social medias. And I will tell you this, we want you to suggest more ideas for us for shows coming up, because most of the greatest ideas we've had have been ones that other people have given us. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for Wheels, I'm Jay, and we'll see you all the next time around.